Good morning, everyone. I'd just like to say, yes, I'm out of my comfort zone, but I'll deliver this presentation the best I can. My name's Okra, and I've lived in Hull all my life, most of my life, from 8 months old, and I'm 63. I was a minority growing up in Hull on the council estate. Not that there's anything wrong with that. I've learnt a lot on streetwise. Well, I think I am. And I was one of 2 families from an ethnic minority background. One of 2. Are you all right? Yeah. I'm glad you did that. Time to pause. And then I was one of 3 families. This was growing up in the 70s. From an from a single parent background. Life was difficult. Hull has some of the most deprived areas in certain areas, mainly East Hull because of the estates, and North Hull. So it was a bit difficult. But growing up, I didn't know anything about my heritage, and it's only most recently I met my real father, who came into my life when I was 13 years ago. And he's from Jamaica. And it was at that time where I took an interest in history and the history of the transatlantic slave trade. And it just happened that things started to unfold at the same time. I'd always grown up having a problem and an issue with my identity. And I'm not so now, because the more I'm learning about the history of the transatlantic slave trade, and I'm also second Windrush generation, I'm finding myself, and I was connected to the Wilberforce Institute at the same time 13 years ago. So I stand here today delivering a presentation on Clive Sullivan, and I think I need to go to the top. As Okra. I'm affiliated as an honorary fellow to the Wilberforce Institute, so I will be delivering a presentation on behalf of Dr. Nick Evans later. But for now, I'm just going to give you a bit of an insight into one of Hull's black heroes. And I just thought, before I start the presentation, this Hull's black hero, Clive Sullivan, he used to work for Bradford and Bingley on Holness Road in East Hull, for those that are not familiar with Hull. He was the only person, really, apart from the other family who I grew up with on the council estate, whether it was people who were working on our estate, whether I was living there, he was the only person who I connected with. And when I used to go past, he used to wave. He was the only person that looked like me, apart from this other family and my sisters. And I know that there's people in this room now that can relate to that as well, without saying to Mike at the back can relate to that. So when you think, like where we are today, we're talking about culture and diversity. Things are changing over time. That doesn't mean to say, when we talk about Hull, for instance, Hull's more culturally diverse, everybody thinks everything's great. It's not. It can bring its challenges. And I think, obviously, Ros has touched on that. So today, I'm just going to give you a presentation on Hull's black hero, Clive Sullivan. So Clive Sullivan was born on the 9th of April 1943 in Splot, Cardiff. He started playing rugby after being introduced to the game at school, and won a selection for Cardiff schools once, but any further progress was halted by a leg injury at the age of 14. Doctors told him he may never walk properly, let alone play active sport again. In 1961, he joined the army after leaving school. Just go up a little bit. After leaving school and working for a while as a motor mechanic, he was posted to Catterick in North Yorkshire. And while there, he was picked for an intern corps rugby match on account of being Welsh. Clive chose to play in the match, as admitting to having a major injury would have led, if he'd admitted that, it would have led to being invalid out of the army, so he didn't tell the army about his, obviously, about his disability. His plan was to deliberately play badly to avoid being picked again. However, instinct took over, and after scoring a long-distance try with no ill effects, he decided to make the most of the army training to further progress his hopes of playing rugby. He sort of lied his way, he sort of ignored his injuries and sort of went into the army, and obviously his family were good at sport, but he wasn't interested, as you can see. So 39 years on after his death and during Hull Black History Month, and I'm saying Hull Black History Month because I'm sure most of you in this room are aware that Black History Month is in the UK is in October. Bearing in mind, Black History is not just for 1 month, it's for all the year round. But I've chose Black History Month because I wanted to touch on that for those that maybe have not heard of it or are not sure. So we're looking at the Hull sportsman, Clive Sullivan. So there he is, when he was posted in Cyprus in 1964. Trials of Bradford and Hull. After an unsuccessful trial game at Bradford Northern, he was approached by a touch judge from the game and offered a trial at Hull. His trial at Hull was a different story. Dubbed Mr X by the Hull Daily Mail, he scored 3 tries and signed as a professional the following day. Now, you might think, well, where's the gap from him interested in sport to, not interested in sport, is in Cardiff and then Hull. He actually did come from a family of sporting, his sisters, everybody running actually. They was all good at sprint. Clive's first 3 seasons were restricted by army duties, 3 knee operations and a nearly fatal car accident in October 1963. Although he returned to play again just 3 months later, he left the army after a spell in Cyprus, and in 1964, free of his army commitments, he returned to Hull in time to play the last game of the season. Clive's international debut. In 1967, he scored 28 tries, 28 matches, and made his international debut from Great Britain, scoring 2 tries against the French. The following year saw him score 7 tries in a single match against Doncaster. His international career peaked in 1972, when he was chosen to captain Great Britain, the first black player to lead a British national team in any major sport. What an achievement that was, especially for the times. Sometimes, in light of what's going on these days, still today, there's obstacles there and there's racism that stands in the way as well. And there's just the normal, sometimes, hierarchy that stops people achieving. So Clive Sullivan represented Wales in 4 World Champion matches. He then, Popular Sully, was one of the few players to be revered from both Hull and Hull Kingston Rovers fans, but he was the only one to score a century or more tries for both clubs, and also to win a Rugby League Challenge Cup winners' medal with each. So he not only achieved his national debut, he also achieved that in Hull. And for Hull, that's a big thing for those that know Hull. I think the Hull split between, the river splits both east and west, the red and whites and the black and whites. If you live in, like I moved from East Hull, which I've lived all my life, you move from East Hull to West Hull, they all say, oh, you've come home from the dark side. And then I'm in West Hull and they say, oh, you left the dark side. So that was quite a big thing. So Sullivan was a winger in the classic mould, and so he actually not only represented for our people, people of colour, people who were the minority groups, but he also brought together people of the city. So he scored 250 tries for Hull before he shocked the city by leaving Hull for Hull Kingston Rovers in 1974, where he won a championship medal in 1979. His 113 tries in 6 seasons at Hull KR made him the only player to score 100 tries for both Hull clubs. What an achievement that was. He returned to Hull FC in 1981 and continued playing until April 1985. So I'll just look at, a few of the slides. The late Clive Sullivan was made an MBE. In his heyday, there he is at Boulevard. I hope you can see it because of the light. There he is, named in greatest, the greatest, number 13. Clive Sullivan is the latest inductee into our greatest ever Hull KR, number 13. So he was a winger in the classic mould, blistering pace, great footwork, and an ability to beat players inside and out. Sully was also an excellent defender, which many forget. And there he is, popular Sully. 1961 to 74, 1981 to 83, and 1984 to 85. And I can remember when they went for the Challenge Cup years ago, when they came back and they won the cup, at Wembley. I've got a photo of me stood in front of the bus, and as the bus is moving, the open top bus, I'm taking pictures and nearly fell backwards and got run over. In those days, health and safety weren't part of the story. And this one, recognition. Clive earned the recognition nationally from the people of Hull and the sport of rugby, and became the first rugby player, there he is, rugby league player to subject to the television programme This Is Your Life, which was extremely rare, followed by the MBE in January 1974. For somebody, a black player, and somebody, a person of colour, to be part of This Is Your Life was not the done thing. He was the first. When you look back, what the time, that for that time it was unheard of. So there we are. There's the two badges. Now we have a derby, the true derby. My sister my youngest sister is a black and white supporter, always has been, even when we lived in East Hull. And one of the sons is Hull SC, and the other son is Hull KR. They both played for West Hull Club when they was teenagers. When my nephew from Hull KR used to walk in the West Hull Rugby Club with the red and white shirt on, I won't tell you what the language was, but it was get it in that bin. And so a true derby, a lot of places have derbies, whether it's in football or in rugby, but the true derby is one where you've got two teams in the city, and that's the makeup of Hull. But to bring those two, there's a lot of banter, but to bring those two together, this was the man that did that. And so Clive Sullivan was shortlisted in, I think, 2011 for the monument, for a monument to be stood with Bobby Moore. Sorry, it wasn't 2011, it was after that, 2011. And he stands beside Bobby Moore in the Wembley Stadium, and it marks 80 years of rugby league being played there as part of the Rugby League hero statue, so he's one of two others. Last year, Clive Sullivan's statue was unveiled in Cardiff, where he was born. And just to say this, when we think he was born in Cardiff, life wasn't easy for him neither in Cardiff. He was a minority there, and his family. So they probably had similar experiences for that time, just as anybody else, anywhere else in any city. And I'm sorry, I made a mistake there, it must have moved. But this is a new statue there, Cardiff there, and the sculptor by Hull Steve Winterburn. So it's a local artist that actually I think he'd be proud of. I'm sorry, I don't know what's happened, but that's me last night with my pictures. But his widow, Ros Sullivan, told the BBC Look North in 2011, he was one of the people and he mixed well with supporters. And Ros goes on to say that her husband was a modest man. And I think that's unique, because I think we have a lot of fame, we have X Factor, we have all different things like that. And people want the fame, and sometimes people forget where they've come from. But he was a modest man, and he was a true gent and a sportsman. So Clive Sullivan, a World Cup winning GB captain and Challenge Cup, there's a photo there. And obviously winner for both clubs. And he died, sadly, in 1985, age 42, of liver cancer. And obviously former Hull FC player Terry Devonshire was Clive Sullivan's best friend, and he said you couldn't meet a better bloke. Everybody loved Clive. So it's, you know, from people of colour, we know why that whole Clive Sullivan was. One, not just because of the rugby, but he represented us as well. He stood for us. It was somebody who we could sort of relate to. And so we need to, even our emerging communities now don't know who Clive Sullivan is, and the next generation don't. So we need to share this story. Maybe somebody might be able to share it a bit better than I'm doing with this PowerPoint. But
You're doing well. I don't know Clive Sullivan.
Yeah, Clive Sullivan where?
Can I interject and be very honest? I have heard of Clive Sullivan way since moving up north, from London, up north, but I thought Clive Sullivan was actually a white person. I'm sorry, I didn't actually know that Clive Sullivan was actually a black person. I'm being honest there.
Well, that's good,
Yeah.
and that's why we need to share this story. And I need to tweak this presentation a bit, obviously.
No, don't worry.
But
You're
no,
getting it
Clive
across.
Sullivan, I know Clive Sullivan's family, and his grandson used to, he's friends with my my nephews. But Clive Sullivan, I cannot tell you what that meant to me. It was good, and people related to him for rugby because he was into rugby, but they might not have had that sort of connection as what it meant to me, because it was about me thinking I won't get picked on. Do you know? And that's the true essence of it. But yes, we need to say about this, you know, about his story. Just let me get my notes, because obviously that's shifted. So the major road was named after him in the city and was the subject of play. And when you look at it, once you get, I don't know, are you all familiar with Hull? Well, once you go through to Hull, you go through Hull from the M62, and when it goes to the 2 lanes from the motorway, that is Clive Sullivan Way, right up until you get to the city centre and the marina. And then Clive would be laughing at this. You get to where the tidal barrier is, and where you can turn off to High. Do you know where the King Billy is? Yeah. And that becomes the Roger Millward Way. Because Roger Millward played with Clive actually. You know, recently, without digressing, just to let you know how you can bring people together, Hull SC have lost nearly all their matches this last season. But Hull KR and that have done really well, but Hull SC will support their opposing team, and that's the same with families and people and friends. You can have your arguments, but come together, and that's what sport does for you. So that, I think that's what this city does with Clive Sullivan. So there's a poem by John Wooden. For when the one great scorer comes to write against your name, it marks not that what that you've won or lost, but how you played the game. Now I think that's good words for not just he was writing about Clive Sullivan, but for us to take away as well. And I think when you look at Clive Sullivan, what a man, 42, what he achieved, do you know, in his short time. And he is remembered, not whether you just like rugby or not, but I think we do need to continue his story.
He was a lovely man.
He was a great man.
Never met him, but
he was lovely.
brilliant.
And Ros, I still see Rosie's wife and that, but I just put for the yeah, no, not Ros.
When you were saying about Ros, how did I come into
But
this?
then again, you did say about Clive Sullivan, you know, and you thought he was right.
Yeah.
Well, Ros it's right, you know.
All right.
Yeah.
But the thing of it is, it's like, I'm obviously coming from London. You don't always know the history of Hull, but it's really good. But through working with Humberside Police, keep hearing Clive Sullivan Way, but it never resonated or rang a bell that that's what Clive Sullivan looked like. So.
Yeah. Well, I still tell the story, and people, so it's not just because I'm interested in rugby, not that I know the rules of the game properly, but he did something for me, being a minority group, and for that time. And what I will tell you is that There is a Clive Sullivan Cup with the City of Hull and District Youth Rugby League. I support them, and they choose players from all the clubs across Hull. So they have clubs from the east, clubs from the west, and from under 11s. And Danny will tell you, we even had the 16s and 18s this year, and it was players that maybe are from Hull and surrounding areas, but of Scottish descent.
Yeah.
And we had, we had the Hull supporters, the service people, players, and Scotland, didn't we, Dan?
We did.
And they do something. Normally it's in Black History Month in October, but this year, because of the work that's been done at Hull KR grounds, it had to be September. But they pick. Not only do we have a Venture Smith Cup, which we did about 12 years ago, 13 years ago, about Venture Smith, who was an African slave who was bought out of slavery, and so there's a Venture Smith Cup. So we say, and that reflects about what happened in history still happens today, and it brings people together. There's also the Clive Sullivan Cup, and players are chosen so from those east and west. So they might play for West Hull, they might play for Wyke, that's West Hull, in West Hull. So they'll have their club shorts on, they'll have their club socks on, but they'll wear the black and white shirts. And you might see a bit of that later on in the presentation, what I deliver for Dr. Nick Evans. But just 6 months after his final appearance, Clive Sullivan died of liver cancer on the 8th of October 1985. His funeral was a mask of black and white and red and white shirts. He has been commemorated thanks to the approach road into Hull, and Clive Sullivan Way, and Clive Sullivan will never be forgotten.
No.